Hello students, I Rajeshwari Shirkanhalli welcome you all in Nagesh Karasgi Orchid School channel. Students, we are discussing chapter number 6, tissues. In the previous session, we have discussed that tissues are nothing but a cluster of cells, means a group of cells. So, they are present in different parts of the body. We have discussed that unicellular organisms perform all their functions with the help of that single cell, but in multicellular organisms there are different type of tissues found in different places. Now, are the tissues same in plants and animals? Yes, they are not same. Your answer is absolutely right. The tissues in plants are different than the tissues in animals. Why? Because plants are totally different than the animals. Plants are stationary, whereas animals are locomotive. Plants prepare their own food, and whereas animals are dependent on others to get the food. So, because of this, there is a difference in the tissues in plants and animals. So, in this chapter, we are going to study both the type of tissues, that is tissues in plants and tissues in animals. In previous session, we started with tissues in plants. In plants, there are mainly two types of the tissues. Which are those? Yes, they are meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. Meristematic tissue is also called as growing tissue or dividing tissue. It has different parts, apical meristem, then lateral meristem and intercalary meristem. So, what is apical meristem? It is present at the tip of roots and stems, and it is responsible for the increase in length of the roots and stems. Lateral meristem is present at the girth of the stems, and because of this the width of the stem increases. Similarly of roots also. And intercalary meristem is present at the base of leaves. So, this is the meristem because of which there are n number of the branches found in the plants. After meristematic tissue, the second type of tissue which we started with that is permanent tissue. Now, permanent tissue is subdivided into two types. One is simple permanent tissue and the another one is complex permanent tissue. We have discussed something about simple permanent tissues. Which are the simple permanent tissues? They are parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. What are parenchyma? These are the living tissues. Mostly they have living cells. The tissues are loosely packed, means there are lot of intercellular spaces are present. They store food and other nutrients. And parenchymal tissues are again of two subtypes. In some of the parenchymal tissues there is presence of chlorophyll, and because of which these parenchymal tissues can undergo photosynthesis. So, such parenchymal tissues which have chlorophyll are called as sclerenchyma, and the second subtype is arenchyma. What is arenchyma? These are the parenchymal tissues which are present in aquatic plants. Aquatic plants have to be light in the weight because they have to float in water, and because of that there is lot of air spaces, air cavities present in such plants, and because of this they get buoyancy and they can float in water. So, such type of parenchymal tissues are called arenchyma. After that, we have discussed about second simple permanent tissue, that is collenchyma. What is collenchyma? It is a tissue which gives flexibility to the plants. You know that we can bend the branches or leaves of the plants and they get bent very easily without breaking. Why? Because they are flexible, and this flexibility is given to them because of presence of collenchyma, that is the second simple permanent tissue. The third simple permanent tissue is sclerenchyma, in which mostly the cells are dead. They are present in the outer part of the trees, of the plants, means bark. Similarly, the coating of seeds, outer coat of the seeds, husk of the coconut, all these are very tough and they are made of sclerenchyma. It gives strength to the plants. Mechanical strength is obtained by the plants because of presence of sclerenchyma. So in parenchyma and collenchyma there are living tissues, whereas in sclerenchyma there are dead tissues. Parenchyma have a lot of space in between them, and whereas in collenchyma there is very little space, and in sclerenchyma there is no space at all. So after discussing about this, let's move to the next point. I have already introduced you to the activity 6.3. So let us revise that activity 6.3. What you have to do in this activity, you have to take a freshly plucked leaf of royo. Then you have to stretch and break it by applying pressure. While breaking it, keep it stretched gently so that some peel or skin projects out from the cut. Remove this peel and put it in petri dish filled with water. Add a few drops of saffron in. Wait for a couple of minutes and then transfer it onto a slide. Gently place a cover slip on it and observe under the microscope. So what you are supposed to do in this activity, you have to take a leaf of royo plant, you have to stretch, break it by applying pressure, and some peel or skin should project out from cut. Then you have to add water to this, you have to place it in the petri dish, add water, then add a strainer that is saffron in, and wait for 2 minutes and then observe it under the microscope by placing it on a slide and covering it with a cover slip. So when you observe, you will find this type of structure on the microscope. So you will find guard cells and epidermal cells. This is lateral view and this is surface view. In this you will find epidermal cells, which are flat thin cells, and there are two bean shaped, kidney shaped cells which are called as guard cells. So you are familiar with these guard cells. What is the function of guard cells? They guard the opening and closing of stomata. You know that during the daytime the stomata are open and during the night they are closed. So this opening and closing of stomata is regulated by guard cells. So what you observe is the outermost layer of cells, which is called as epidermis. So when this slide is observed under the microscope, we get the outermost layer, which is called as epidermis. The epidermis is usually made of a single layer of cells. So what is an epidermis? It is having a single layer, means only one layer of cells. In some plants living in very dry habitats, dry habitats means in the deserts. So we find there, instead of one single layer, we find there are many layers of epidermal cells. But this is for the plants which live in the dry areas, and there the epidermis may be thicker since protection against water loss is critical. So dry habitat means there is more temperature and water loss is very critical. So for protecting the plants from this water loss, there is thick epidermis instead of a thin epidermis. The entire surface of a plant has this outer covering of epidermis. So the whole surface of the plant is made of epidermis. This epidermis protects all the parts of the plant, as the entire cover is made of epidermis. So plants get protection from outside atmosphere because of presence of epidermis. Now epidermal cells on the aerial parts of the plant often secrete a waxy, water resistant layer on their outer surface. Now epidermis, as I have told, it is present on all the parts of the plants, but the aerial parts means the upper parts of the trees, big trees, there the epidermal cells often secrete a waxy substance, and there is a water resistant layer on their outer surface. Why? Because this aids in protection against loss of water. So, because of presence of this waxy and water resistant layer, the water loss is less. It helps in the protection against loss of water. Similarly, it helps in mechanical injury and invasion by parasitic fungi. So, plants get protection from loss of water, from mechanical injury and from attack by parasitic fungi because of presence of this waxy layer, waxy and water resistant layer on the parts of aerial parts, especially aerial parts of the plant. Since it has a protective role to play, cells of the epidermal tissue form a continuous layer without intercellular spaces. So, epidermal tissue doesn't have any space in between the cells. It forms a continuous layer without any intercellular spaces, means there is no space in between the cells. Most epidermal cells are relatively flat. So, how are these epidermal cells? They are flat. Often their outer and side walls are thicker than the inner walls. So, these epidermal cells are mostly thicker at their sides and on the outer part, and inner wall is thinner. We can observe small pores here and there in the epidermis of the leaf. These pores are called as stomata. So, as just now I have showed that epidermal layer consists of small pores. These pores are present on the surface of leaf and they are called as stomata. You know that the functions of stomata. What are the functions of stomata? Yes, the first one is they are responsible for photosynthesis. Means photosynthesis in plants is carried out because of presence of stomata. Secondly, they are responsible for exchange of gases. So, through stomata the gases gets exchanged. The stomata are enclosed by two kidney shaped cells which are called as guard cells. So, what are guard cells? These are two kidney shaped cells which are there at the entry of each stomata. They are necessary for exchanging gases with the atmosphere. Similarly, transpiration also takes place through stomata. So, this is another function of stomata. Transpiration means loss of water in the form of water vapor. So, continuously water is lost from the plants, that is called as transpiration. So, this is loss of water in the form of water vapor and it also takes place through stomata. Now, think of which gas may be required for photosynthesis. So, as you all know, you are familiar with the process of photosynthesis, that for photosynthesis carbon dioxide gas is required. Plants absorb carbon dioxide gas from the atmosphere and synthesize food. You have to find out the role of transpiration in plants. So, what is the role of transpiration? You are familiar with this process of transpiration also. Yes, yes, you are right. Transpiration means loss of water. So, what happens when water is lost from the aerial parts especially of the plants? They require water and then water gets transported to these parts from the roots. That means a water column is formed in these trees and this water travels in the upward direction, and along with the water the dissolved nutrients, that is salts from the soil, also get transported. Means in that way the different parts of the plants get all the nutrients. So, transpiration is very important in the plants, especially in the tall trees. Okay. Epidermal cells of the roots whose function is water absorption, commonly bear long hair-like parts that greatly increase the total absorptive surface area. So, the epidermal cells of the roots, what they do, what is their main function? To absorb water. Along with the water, they absorb the dissolved nutrients also. So, for that, for absorbing more water, the surface area should be more, and for that, the roots have hair-like parts which increases the surface area and more water can be absorbed by these epidermal cells. Now, in some plants like desert plants, epidermis has a thick waxy coating of cutin. So, in desert plants we find there is a thick layer of waxy layer which is having cutin. What is a cutin? It is a chemical substance which has the quality of waterproof. Means because of this waxy coating of cutin, water does not get lost. As you know that desert plants means there is too much temperature and less availability of water. So, to survive in this adverse condition, the water present in these plants should not get lost. So, for that the epidermis has a thick waxy coating made up of cutin. So, that is why there is the presence of cutin which helps in protecting the plant from extreme heat and from getting lost of water. Now, is the outer layer of a branch of a tree different from the outer layer of a young stem? Now, if you observe the outer layer of young stem, okay, and the outer layer of a branch of a tree means which is fully grown, you will find there is a difference. These outer layers are not same. As plants grow older, the outer protective tissue undergoes certain changes. A strip of secondary meristem replaces the epidermis on the stem. So, in the young stem there are meristematic tissues, but once they grow fully, this meristematic tissues gets replaced by epidermis of the cell. So, in the branches of the big trees we find epidermal cells, and whereas in the young stem we find meristematic cells. Now, cells on the outside are cut off from this layer. This forms the several layers thick cork or the bark of the tree. So, cells on the outside are cut off and they form a very thick layer, and this thick layer is called as cork or bark of the tree. You know that bark of the tree is very strong. Cells of cork are dead and compactly arranged without intercellular spaces. So, how are the cells of this cork? They are dead and these cells are very close to each other. They are very tightly packed, means compactly arranged, and there are no intercellular spaces, means there is no space, there is no gap in between the cells. They also have a chemical called as suberin in their walls, which makes them impervious to gases and water. Impervious means no gases and water can pass through it. So, once the bark, you must have seen in the cork or bark of tree, it is very tough, very hard, and from this bark of tree no gases or water can pass. Why? Because there is no intercellular space, the cells are dead, they are compactly arranged, and they have a chemical called as suberin. That is why this bark of the tree give mechanical strength to the trees. So, that is also very important for the trees. Okay, now in this figure 6.6 you can observe protective tissue is shown. These are all cork cells and here there is ruptured epidermis. So, you can see here the cells are very tightly packed and there is no space shown at all. So, this is all about simple permanent tissue. As I have told that in plants, permanent tissues are of two types, simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue. In simple permanent tissue, we have discussed about parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. After that, we have discussed about epidermis. Now, let us move to the next concept, that is second type of permanent tissue, which is called as complex permanent tissue. Now, these complex permanent tissues are of two types and each one of them have four subtypes. So, which are those two types of complex permanent tissue? They are xylem and phloem. So, let us begin with complex permanent tissue. The different types of tissues we have discussed until now are all made of one type of cells which look like each other, and that is why they are called as simple permanent tissue. In simple permanent tissue, in a particular tissue, all the cells are of same type and they look similar to each other. But in complex permanent tissue, it is not like that. So, the type of cells which look alike and they are made of same type of cells, they are called as simple permanent tissues. Yet another type of permanent tissue is complex tissue. Complex tissues are made of more than one type of cells. All these cells coordinate to perform a common function. So, in complex tissues, the cells are not of single type, they are made of more than one type of cells and they all coordinate with each other and they perform a common function. Xylem and phloem are examples of such complex tissues. They both are conducting tissues and constitute a vascular bundle. So, what are the complex permanent tissues? Xylem and phloem. They are called as conducting tissues because they conduct. So, let us discuss what they conduct. You know already that xylem conduct water and salts and whereas phloem conduct food. So, vascular or conductive tissue is a distinctive feature of the complex plants. One of that has made possible their survival in the terrestrial environment. Okay, in figure 6.3, which already we have discussed in our previous session, in that there is a section of stem, there you can find xylem and phloem are also shown. So, xylem and phloem are the two complex permanent tissues and they perform different function. They both are conducting tissues because they conduct, means they carry, they transport certain substances. What do xylem transport? Water and dissolved salts in the water, and phloem transport food. Now, as I have told that each one of them have subtypes. So, let us see the subtypes of xylem. Xylem consists of tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma and xylem fibers. So, these are the four elements of xylem, which are those tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma and xylem fibers. The cells have thick walls and many of them are dead cells. Tracheids and vessels are tubular structures. So, what is the shape of tracheids and vessels? They are like tubes. This allows them to transport water and minerals vertically. So, water gets transported vertically. There is a vertical column formed in the plants and this is because of presence of tracheids and vessels. Okay, so, these tracheids and vessels allow the transportation of water and minerals vertically in upward direction. The parenchyma stores food. So, the third type, xylem parenchyma. What is the function of xylem parenchyma? It stores food and helps in the sideways conduction of water. So, because of the presence of xylem parenchyma, the water gets conducted, means gets transported on the sides also. Not only in the upward direction, it goes to different parts of the plant. Fibers are mainly supportive in function. So, these are the four types of the elements of xylem: tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma and xylem fibers. The cells have thick walls and mainly they are made of dead cells. Now what is the function of tracheids and vessels? They allow the transportation of water and minerals vertically. What is the function of xylem parenchyma? It stores food and helps in sideways conduction of water. And the function of xylem fibers, they are mainly supportive in nature. So this is the first complex permanent tissue. The second one is phloem. As you know that phloem is a conducting tissue and it conducts food. You know that food is mainly prepared in the leaves of the plants by photosynthesis. But if this food gets stored only in the leaves, then other parts of the plant do not get food. From food they get energy, so they cannot survive. So this food should be passed to each and every part of the plant. So this food is transported by phloem. Now phloem is also made up of four types of elements. Which are those? One is sieve tubes, second is companion cells, third one is phloem fibers and fourth one is phloem parenchyma. Means in this tissue also there are parenchyma and fibers, but along with that phloem consists of sieve tubes and companion cells. Sieve tubes are tubular cells with perforated walls. Do you know what is the meaning of perforated walls? There are small holes, pores are there through which exchange of substances can take place. Phloem is unlike xylem in that materials can move in both the directions in it. As I have told that in the xylem the water is supplied to the soil, similarly the nutrients are present in the soil and water gets moved by the xylem in the upward direction, means in only one direction. But in phloem the food gets transported to all the parts of the plant, and for that even the roots also require food. So the movement of food, that is transportation of food, is in both directions. Phloem transports food from leaves to other parts of the plant. So xylem transports in only one direction, that is in upward direction, and whereas phloem transports the food in both the directions, that is upward as well as downward direction. Okay, so if the food is prepared just by leaves and if it goes only to the upper parts, then the other parts of the plant do not get food. But phloem transports food in both the directions, so that food can be reached to different parts of the plant. Except for phloem fibers, phloem cells are living cells. So phloem fibers consist of dead cells and they give strength, and whereas other three, that is sieve tubes, then companion cells and phloem parenchyma, are living cells. You can see here this is phloem and this is xylem. Just look at these figures. Here in this you can find there are types of complex tissues are shown. This is tracheids, these are vessels, and these are xylem parenchyma. Tracheids consist of pits, vessels consists of pits as well, and xylem parenchyma consists of nucleus, cytoplasm, etc. And in fourth figure you can see the section of phloem is shown. So these are the two types of complex permanent tissues. So students, what we have discussed today, we have discussed about plant cells. We started discussing about plant cells in our previous session. In that session we discussed about parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. And today we continued our discussion. We have discussed about the role of epidermis in the plants. Epidermis is very important as it gives protection to the plants. What is an epidermis? It is a thin layer of cells which are compactly packed and there is no intercellular space present in between these cells. So after discussing about epidermis, we have discussed about the second type of permanent tissue, that is complex permanent tissue. Complex permanent tissues are of two types, xylem and phloem. What is xylem? It is a conducting tissue which conducts water and dissolved salts. The four elements of the xylem we have discussed. These four elements of the xylem are xylem tracheids, xylem vessels, xylem parenchyma and xylem fibers. Then the second type of complex permanent tissue is phloem, which is also a conducting tissue. It conducts food. Food is mainly prepared by leaves in the plants, but this food is transported to all the parts of the plant with the help of phloem. Now conduction in xylem is in only one direction, and whereas in phloem it is in both the directions, in upward as well as in downward. We have also discussed the different types of elements present in the phloem. They are sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem parenchyma and phloem fibers. So here we have discussed all about the plant tissues. In the next session we will start with animal tissues. Okay, as we have seen in the beginning of the chapter, the tissues are different in plants and different in animals. So we have discussed about plant tissues. In the coming sessions we will go through the animal tissues. So students, read all the concepts, note down the important points and prepare MCQs by your own. Okay, so today here we will stop. Thank you.